I'm the Reverend Bill Selazny, the minister at Channing Memorial Church. Welcome to the Channing Memorial Church Summer Web Service for August 9th. Our theme today is the emotional and spiritual journey of going home. Using his own life story, our presenter today asks if we can really go home. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus argued that flux is the primary feature of the world, and he said that no person ever steps in the same river twice. But the philosopher Heraclitus says that nothing changes. In the way of truth, he asserts that reality is one, change is impossible, and existence is timeless, uniform, and necessary. So, can a person go home, or is that only a fantasy or dream? In a moment, we will learn what our speaker has to say about this. We begin our service today with our chalice lighting. The words of our chalice lighting are based on the writings of Jean Wallstrom and Kate McPhee. In this small flame dwells the beacon of door lights and lanterns guiding traveler home. The flame of hearth fires and furnaces tended throughout the generations that have given heat to a home. The transforming energy and power of our sun that sustains life on our home planet. May this small flame, with all that it symbolizes, guide our minds and our hearts to reaffirm our commitment to the value of home. Shall we step back now for a few minutes and let the music of the prelude presented by the music director of Channing Memorial Church, Janet Grant, calm our minds and quiet our hearts so we may fully engage with the message we are about to receive from our guest presenter. Mr. Tim Phelps is our presenter today. Tim is a relatively new member of Channing Memorial Church and has become involved in our Great Guys group and the worship committee. Tim has been a journalist, spending many years of his life covering wars and famines overseas, and more recently covering Washington politics, that he describes as war in a different way. He recently moved back from Washington, D.C. after an absence of 50 years to be in a cottage on a farm in Portsmouth where he grew up. He now lives on the 90-acre farm where his father tilled, which he describes as being almost exactly the way he remembers it from his youth, and he feels his father's presence everywhere. His move back to Portsmouth got him thinking about the novel You Can't Go Home Again by Thomas Wolfe. And he says that he has come to disagree with Wolfe's thesis. As he puts it, I have come home again, and you can as well. I present to you Tim Phelps.
Good morning. I'm Tim Phelps. Thomas Wolfe is one of my favorite authors, but I disagree with him about the premise for his famous novel, You Can't Go Home Again. Here's what Wolfe wrote in that book. You can't go back home to your family, back home to your childhood, back home to romantic love, back home to a young man's dreams of glory and of fame, back home to exile, to escape to Europe and some foreign land. He said, you can't go back home to lyricism, to singing just for singing's sake, back home to aestheticism, to one's youthful idea of the artist and the all-sufficiency of art and beauty and love. You can't go back home to the ivory tower, back home to places in the country, to the cottage in Rhode Island, perhaps, away from all the strife and conflict of the world, back home to the father you have lost and have been looking for, back home to someone who can help you, save you, ease the burden for you, back home to the old forms and systems of things, which once seemed everlasting, but which are changing all the time, back home to the escapes of time and memory. Well, darn it, I have just done all of that. I spent my life overseas covering wars and famines, and in Washington covering the culture war we now call politics. But I have just now moved back from an absence of 50 years to a cottage on the farm I grew up on in Portsmouth. I have, in fact, come home to the father I have lost and been looking for. Because the 90-acre farm he tilled so lovingly is almost exactly the same, and he is everywhere. I have gotten away from all the strife and conflict in the world, nowadays that being COVID and Trump. And in this time of pestilence, many others are doing the same thing. U-Haul trucks have been sold out for months. I surprise people when I say that this island we live on does not feel much different than it did when I was a boy. Yes, there are a lot of new houses, but the population is actually smaller now. And seen with fresh eyes, the development is tasteful, not like the McMansions you find elsewhere. The architecture is usually in keeping with the old colonial, Georgian, or federal styles. And in some older streets, Spring Street, for example, are actually a lot nicer. It makes it easier to feel at home, to come home. This question of going back or returning is an ancient issue that goes back itself to the roots of Western philosophy 5 centuries before Christ. The pre-Socratic Greek philosopher Heraclitus argued that flux is the primary feature of the world and said, no man ever steps in the same river twice. But Parmenides took issue with him. He believed that nothing changes. In the way of truth, he asserts that reality is one, change is impossible, and existence is timeless, uniform, and necessary. As I look out over fields of green beans and corn to the same Narragansett Bay that for a century carried slave ships to Africa, I must dispute my literary friend Thomas Wolfe up to a point. I have come home again. I am home in my old age in search of my childhood, which is all around me. I have always been puzzled by my younger self about why I did certain things. I'm at a loss to understand my adventurism when all I ever really wanted to do was to be back home on the farm. Olive Kitteridge, in Elizabeth Stroud's poignant new novel about aging, Olive Again, sat down at the typewriter in her final days and typed her epitaph. She wrote, "I do not have a clue who I have been. Truthfully, I do not understand a thing." But Olive spent her last years trying to find out who she really was in order to make herself a better person. And so must we all. Thank you.
The hymn, Spirit of Life, has been part of our Sunday services for several years. Its words remind us of what we Unitarian Universalists hold close to our hearts. I invite you to sing or hum the melody, or just sit back and listen to the music as a meditation. The Reverend Elaine Gallagher Gurman gives us our closing thoughts. Walk softly, speak truthfully, love gently, breathe deeply, live wisely, be in peace. So be it.